Share the screen. All right, today it's called Exploring the 10th House, and we are indeed going to do that. But actually, today we're going to do it's actually three lessons in one. And of course, I usually include some type of preliminary information that brings us to it. So everything that we're going to do is going to be specific to kind of helping us with what we're going to do today, which is look at the 10th house and issues around the 10th house, etc. And then also it's going to help us going forward with other things that I want to do with us. So that's basically kind of what I've been doing. I've been kind of creating a building block system so that you understand the vocabulary and we can move forward, so that you understand the concepts and we can move forward. And then before you know it, we're all moving forward. So that's what we're going to do today, where with everything that we're looking at and talking about, we're always interested in how are the planets that either rule the sign or are in the sign, how well those planets are situated themselves. And so, like I started last week, we're going to go off a little bit different. We're going to go a little bit of a different place this week. But like I started last week, the two main ways in which a planet can be rendered strong or weak is by essential dignity, which is by the sign it's in, and accidental dignity, which is by house placement. Today, we're going to look at the 5 essential dignities. We've already talked about 2 of them, domicile and exaltation. So you all know about that. Those of you who've been with me for the past weeks or whatever are pretty familiar with domicile and exaltation, I would hope by now. And definitely, it's among the things that you should be looking at memorizing. You should be memorizing the zodiac and the sequence of the zodiac. You should be memorizing the planets and the signs who is ruled by what planet. And then you should also be memorizing who is exalted in what sign, and also the opposites, right? So you want to know who are the domiciles, or what are the domiciles of the planets, and what are their opposites, which would be their detriments. And you want to know what are the exaltations of the planets, and you want to know what are the opposites of those signs, which would be their fall. Okay, so all of these things that we're talking about and we're going to kind of move away a little bit from, those are the specific to reading things. Like when you're looking at a chart, you should always be taking into account, oh, Venus is in Libra, she's in her domicile, boom, that should mean blah, 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 right? But today we're going to look at the 5 essential dignities. And so as the dignities kind of, all of this is old. This all comes from the same book, or the same 2 books. So all of this is quite old. This idea of these 5 essential dignities that a planet in a specific degree, right? Because the degree is really important. So certainly the degree isn't important if a planet is in its own sign or if it's in the sign of its exaltation. Even in triplicity, which I'm just walking down the list here, not necessarily. But as we get to turn and face, it really becomes about what specific degree, what that means for it. And we're going to look at this all, what that means for the planet and what that means for its dignity. So there are 5 ways in which a planet can be dignified: by domicile, by exaltation, by triplicity, by term or bound, and by face. Okay, and you can see the number of points. And so this pointing system is what developed over time. I'd probably say by the 13th or 14th century, the pointing system was kind of in use widely. But I don't know that it was necessarily used at around this time, this 9th century Arabic time period, although it would make sense. So domicile, we've looked at this before. We've talked about the 6 androgynous pairs, which represent the signs that are the signs as masculine and feminine aspects of planets. And so we don't really need to go through that too much, but as you see, a planet in its own domicile is like a person at home in their own rule. These are the domiciles of the planets. If you don't have that already, we're just going to go through this kind of quickly. And you can certainly stop me if you need to. All right, exaltation. Planet its exaltation is like a person who is in their own kingdom of glory and glory. So these are the exaltations of the planets, right? So Saturn is exalted in Libra, Jupiter Cancer, Mars Capricorn, etc. So these are the exaltations. As you can see, exaltation is considered less grounded and durable than domicile. Hi, Lena. So, Lena, what I'd love is if you, I hope that you're still able to get to the things that I just uploaded into the chat. But if you look into the chat box, there should be 2 documents that I shared that I'd love for you to download that we're going to work with in a little bit. And actually, we'll be working with in really quite soon. All right, so exaltation, we just got to that. Notice how it says exaltation is considered less grounded and durable than domicile, and that is because earlier, Mercury in the domicile, Gemini is masculine, its domicile is considered strong and durable in effect, and that tends to be the difference between when a planet is in its domicile, there's a durability to the effect, and when the planet is in its exaltation, where it's shakier, there's more of a larger. I think Claire France talked about the rock and roll people who trash the 5-star hotel, and because they don't think they're paying for it, but then the bill comes later, and that's how they end up penniless junkies when they're 35. All right, so that's kind of more rise and fall, but that's kind of exaltation. So triplicity, so we shouldn't have to kind of talk about like the substance of the planet and all that. Almost everybody here has been with me, so you all should kind of know what's going on with all of that, and that's great. Like I said, we can all start moving forward now. Okay, this is where it breaks down, where things get interesting and fun. Triplicity, and this is almost always one of the first lessons that I teach privately, and this is one of the hidden things about ancient astrology or traditional astrology that is really super, super important. Claire France, would you interact with Gina, please, and let her know what she needs to do about the chat? So be looking at the chat box, Gina, to be downloading anything that's there. There's a document that's there. Okay, so triplicity, a planet in its own triplicity is like a one among his own relatives. All right. Here, hold on a second. We need to mute you. I think you took care of it. Thank you. All right, beautiful. Okay, so triplicity is another word for element. Triplicity means element. So what the 4 elements are, we're going to get to that in a second. But you know what the 4 elements are, right? Earth, water, fire, air. Okay, so those are the 4 triplicities. Within each triplicity, there are 3 zodiac signs. So there are 3 earth signs. There are 3 water signs. There are 3 fire signs. There are 3 air signs. And people are always asking about their grand trines. So that's the grand trine is the triplicity of the 3 signs that make up the 1 element. It's also representing the 3 planets that rule an element. And as you can see here, 3 signs in each element, 3 planets that rule a sect. We're going to talk about sect in just a second. Sect in a sec. And then 3 planets that rule each element. So instead of an element, each element. It should be each element. All right. So let's talk sect for just a second. We have talked about it before, and almost everybody except our newest people should be on board with us around it. So is it day or night in your chart? Were you born in the daytime or were you born at night? You can figure that out by knowing if the sun is above the horizon or below the horizon. So the horizon is the line between the ascendant and the 7th house. If the sun is above the horizon, it's daytime. If the sun is below the horizon, it's nighttime, no matter what else is above. Okay? So the sun below the horizon is nighttime. So what did I say? There are 3 signs in each element. There are 3 planets who rule a sect. So there are 2 sects, right? Day and night. Oh, so the 2 sects. Diurnal, nocturnal. All right. So is it day or night? We just figured that out. Hopefully you're looking at your chart and figuring that out. These are the 3 diurnal planets, the Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn. These are the 3 diurnal planets. They're also masculine. Okay, so the daytime planets are the Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn. The daytime signs are what? Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, Aquarius, right? So those are the diurnal masculine signs. The diurnal masculine planets are the Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn. The 3 nocturnal planets, okay, so sect and triplicity are kind of wed, and we're just going to see it further and further as we get into what's going on. It's all going to make sense. It's all going to be like, what are you doing? It's going to, I promise you, it's going to make sense. The 3 nocturnal planets are the Moon, Venus, and Mars. Moon and Venus are the feminine planets. Mars is a masculine planet. Those are the 3 nocturnal planets. What are the nocturnal signs? Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, Scorpio, Capricorn, Pisces, right? So those are the feminine nocturnal signs. All right. There are 4 triplicities. We just talked about that. The fire, air, water, and earth triplicity. 3 planets are allotted to each element. Remember, we said that already. 3 zodiac signs to an element. 3 planets to a sect, right? 3 planets rule 1 sect, and now 3 planets rule 1 element. All right, so 3 planets are allotted to each element. There is a sequential pattern that changes for nocturnal charts. So there is a hierarchy. Because triplicity is tied to sect, there is a hierarchy of rulership based on whether the chart is diurnal or nocturnal. Okay, so any questions about that before I move on? Okay, so I'm just going to go back to this one more time so you can see what we're talking about. The number 3 is key. There are 3 signs in each element. Remember that triplicity means element. 3 signs are in each element. Triplicity is wed to sect. There are 3 planets that rule each sect. And 3 planets rule each element / triplicity. All right? Okay. Moving on. Okay. This is how triplicity works. We're veering off into essential dignity land, and we're veering off even a little bit even further, but it will all come back, I promise. There is always a diurnal ruler of the triplicity who takes precedence for diurnal charts. There is always a nocturnal ruler of the triplicity who takes precedence for nocturnal charts. Then there is a ruler that is known as the participator. All right, so we're going to figure out who they are now. There are 2 types of triplicities. There are the masculine diurnal triplicities, and there are the feminine nocturnal triplicities. The masculine diurnal triplicities are fire and air. Now, why are they fire and air? What are the masculine diurnal signs? Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, Aquarius, fire, air, fire, air, fire, air. Those are the masculine diurnal signs. So the masculine diurnal triplicity would match those two qualities. So it would match the zodiacal qualities as well. So the day ruler for the fire triplicity, which fire is the east. Remember we were talking about directions and signs and all of that stuff when we were talking about zodiac signs. So fire signs, if you have something in a fire sign, that's facing the eastern direction, or that's representing the eastern direction. And so the day ruler is the sun, which makes sense. The night ruler is Jupiter, which also makes sense. And the participator is Saturn. All right, the heir. So that one all makes sense, right? The sun rules Leo and is exalted in Aries, which are both fire signs, so it makes sense it would be the day ruler. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, so that makes sense that he would be the night ruler. Saturn is daytime. This is the daytime triplicity. So Saturn is one of the rulers of the day, so he's involved in it as well. All right, so the heir triplicity is the day ruler is Saturn. So many of you who have started in modern astrology may be wondering what that's about, or what that doesn't make any sense. But actually, Saturn is called the father of heir because Saturn rules Aquarius. And as a matter of fact, his zodiacal joy is Aquarius, and Saturn is exalted in Libra. Both of those are air signs. So Saturn is actually the day ruler of the triplicity of air. Mercury, who of course rules Gemini, and both of whose signs are what we call winged, he rules the night for the air triplicity, and Jupiter is the participator. So this is the air triplicity is the only triplicity that involves Mercury. The nocturnal triplicities are earth and water. Oh, and air is the western direction. We didn't talk about that. Okay, so the feminine nocturnal triplicities are ruled by the moon, Venus, and Mars. The earth triplicity, which represents the southern direction, is the day ruler is Venus. The night ruler is the moon, which makes sense. The participator is Mars. We think Venus rules Taurus. Night ruler moon is exalted in Taurus, and then participator Mars is exalted in Capricorn. All of those are earth signs. Also, water triplicity, north. So the day ruler is Venus, who of course is exalted in Pisces. Night ruler is Mars, who owns Scorpio, and then participator is Moon, who owns Cancer. Now you can see that here. So we want to create a little. If you know the glyphs well enough and want to create a little something that looks like that, you can do that. Now, what I'm going to talk about next is I want to teach you a little technique. I think we have, so I want to teach you a little technique. I'll keep this up for just another second, and also open to questions in case anybody has one. All right, so I'll keep that up for a bit. You can see the three fire signs. Sun is the day ruler, Jupiter is the night ruler, Saturn is the participator. For the earth signs, Venus is the day ruler, Moon is the night ruler, Mars is the participator. For the air signs, Saturn by day, Mercury by night, Jupiter participating. For triplicity from water, Venus by day, Mars by night, Moon is the participator. So let's look at some of the usages, or some of the uses. I sound like I'm drunk, but I promise you I haven't had anything to drink at all. I haven't had anything to drink in a while. Okay, first of all, they're one of the 5 essential dignities, so they end up kind of fortifying a planet, but by the planet being there. The other is they can be used to separate the native's life into 3 equal parts of approximately 28 years. Okay, so the triplicities, and you can do that, mind you, for every house. So you'll see in these particular books or whatever, they'll say, and marriage. So for instance, for the 7th house, they'll say, and the first triplicity ruler represents the state of the marriage in the first part of the life. And the second triplicity ruler represents the state of the marriage in the second part of life. And then the third triplicity ruler represents the state of the marriage in the third part of life. So that's a usage for what we're dealing with. Then the ancients used them as significators for different aspects of the same house. Now, I'm still playing, this is one of those things that I'm playing with to get an idea of whether I think it really has validity or not. And believe it or not, the 10th house was one of the places that I was looking at this the most. And I don't know. I mean, who knows? Maybe 5 years from now, I'll look at it and I'll go eureka. But I don't know really necessarily if I 100% think it. I'm still kind of playing with it. But as you can see, the example that I gave is the first triplicity of the ruler of the 4th house represents fathers. The second represents homes and lands. And the third represents buried treasure. So what I want you to look at right now is I want you to look at your chart. I want you to look at the cusp of the 4th house. And I want you to write in the chat what triplicity it belongs to, so what element we're dealing with. And, oh, okay, wait, but so that'll be the first step. And then the second step is to tell me who the first triplicity ruler is. However, if it's a daytime chart, the first triplicity ruler will be the day ruler. And if it's a nighttime chart, the first triplicity ruler will be the night ruler. So for instance, I think I used my chart here as an example. So my chart is nocturnal, therefore I took the moon. Let's just say we're looking at, let's say the moon is the ruler of the 4th in this particular case, okay? So I used the moon. The moon is at 27 Aries. Aries belongs to the fire triplicity. The rulers of the fire triplicity are Sun by day, Jupiter by night, Saturn participating in that order by day. Therefore, Jupiter rules the first period of life, Sun rules the second period of life. Why? Because Jupiter is the nighttime ruler. So if your chart is a nocturnal chart, you always start with the second ruler. So what we think of as the second ruler. So let's go back to here. Let's go back to the visual aid. If your chart is a nighttime chart, the order for all of your triplicity rulers is night, day, participator. If your chart is a daytime chart, a diurnal chart, your sequence is day, night, participator. If it's a nighttime chart, it's night, day, participator. So, any takers want to try putting in the 4th house? So now that hopefully you've got an idea of what I'm talking about, so we can do that there. Or if you want, we can wait and do it a little later, but I don't care. We can do it here. But so take into account, even if you decide you don't want to put it into the chat, take into account that first triplicity ruler, remember, if it's nighttime and if you're a nighttime birth, that it will be the night ruler will be the first triplicity ruler. Then that would be the triplicity ruler. That planet would represent the father. And then so taking my own chart as an example again, if we're talking about fire, Jupiter would be the representative of fire because he's the nighttime ruler. Sun would be the representative of homes and lands because he's the daytime ruler. And Saturn would always, in every case, be the representative of buried treasure because he's the participator. The third ruler is always last. It's the day and the nighttime rulers that change. So that's what I mean about the precedence. I'm not getting any questions, so I'm assuming that everybody's following along okay. So this is something that I do actually want you to work with me, and I do want you to put into. So if some of you follow at all Chris Brennan's astrology podcast, he recently had an episode about finding the predominator in the chart. And this technique that we're just going to look at for a second is a little bit of that, is a piece of that. So the predominator in the chart is the planet the predominator is actually the light who is in authority. right? So this technique is called the light and authority technique. So we're basically finding the predominator on some level, but we're also finding another level of it for us. And so we're gonna look at it through the triplicity rulership level. And one of the things that they said was that that I remember them writing was that the predominator is sets the tone of the life. The triplicity rulers, the day and nighttime ruler, are the oars that row the boat of the life. And the participator is I forget, might be the boat itself. And maybe, yeah, the participator might be the boat itself or something like that. I'll look for that later and come back to you about that. But there was something about it. So this was considered really important. And I remember when I was looking at the Hellenistic, at Vettius Valens, at the Hellenistic sources, that he would always start with this. He would always start his own. There are a lot of demonstration charts in this 2nd century book by Vettius Valens, and he would always start his delineations with this technique. And so I kind of got into the habit of doing it as well. Okay, so the light and authority technique, or the predominator. But we're not really doing the full predominator technique, so that's one of the reasons I'm not kind of calling it the predominator technique. Sun and moon are considered luminaries or lights. They are not necessarily planets. They're technically not planets. The planets are the 5 wandering stars: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter and Saturn, and then of course your outer planets. If your chart is diurnal, you're going to use the sun for this technique. If your chart is nocturnal, I love it when I find these little things that I've screwed up. If the chart is nocturnal, then you're going to use the moon. So find that now. Okay, so is it daytime in my chart? Is it nighttime? Find the moon, find the sun to correspond. Note the element or triplicity the light is occupying. So the sign will tell you what element it is in. Note the planets who rule the triplicity the light in authority is occupying. As you see here, if the chart is diurnal, the day ruler will rule the first 28 years of life. The night ruler will rule the second 28 years of life, and the third ruler will rule until death. And if the chart is nocturnal, the night ruler will rule for the first 28 years, the day ruler will rule for the second 28 years, and the third ruler will rule until death. So, once again, we can use my chart because my chart is nocturnal. So the moon is at 27 Aries. Aries belongs to the fire triplicity. The rulers of the fire triplicity are Sun by day, Jupiter by night, Saturn participating. So therefore, Jupiter rules the first period of life, the Sun rules the second period of life, and Saturn rules the third. So what I'd like you to do right now is, I would like you to write into the chat what triplicity the moon is, or or who are your 3 planets that represent your 3 28-year areas of life. And while you do that, we will move on after you do that. We'll move on for a little bit. Also, this is a good place for questions. I don't hear anybody saying anything, so I was expecting a little bit more confusion. So either you're totally confused or you're asleep or something, but I need a sign of life somewhere. So write something in, even if it's home. All right, well, going on. I mean, the other thing is, I think most of us have been together long enough that we should be feeling relatively comfortable. If you want to unmute yourself and blurt it out, you can feel free to do that too. That's fine with me. Then I'm like, and also 1 or 2 people here, the charts I kind of know. So we've talked about it before.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you see the chart? Because we're kind of, or sorry, not the chart, the chat. We're kind of posting in the chat, but I'm not sure if you're seeing it.
Oh, are you? Okay, no, I can't see the chat. Hold on a second.
Yeah, because we're all kind of trying to put in the bits, but we're not sure.
Got it. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, I'm going to unshare for just a second. We'll come back and I'll deal with everybody's chat here. Thank you. Okay, people have been asking. All right. All right, we need to see where the ruler of the fourth house is. That's right. No, not where oh, good question. Okay. Let's forget the whole fourth house thing for right now. I'm so sorry. I didn't see any of this stuff. I couldn't kind of get it to come up. Fourth house cusp is in Leo, so fire. Okay, Anne Maria has this down. Fourth house cusp is Leo, so fire triplicity, nocturnal chart. So triplicity ruler will be Jupiter. So the first triplicity ruler will be Jupiter. That would be representative of your father. Excellent work, Anna. That's what you all are trying to do with everything that we would be dealing with. All right, perfect. Nocturnal chart, Leo, fourth house, fire triplicity, Jupiter, Ascendant, Saturn, absolutely. Fourth house cusp is Leo, okay. Are we looking at the ruler of the fourth house here regardless? No, we are not. No, we are not, Mariah. We are looking at the triplicity rulers of the element that the sign on the cusp of the fourth in this particular case. Okay, so that's what we're not looking for the fourth house ruler. We're looking, first of all, you're going to say, oh, Virgo is there. Virgo is an earth sign. Triplicity is of the sign. Is it in earth? Yeah, triplicity. Remember, triplicity means element. Which element is the sign? That's right. Same, I have moon in Aries too, so all these fire with the triplicities for not memorized will do. Okay, I'll put that back up. Sorry, my power went out. Okay, so Sun and Earth triplicity, Venus first ruler, Moon second, third moon, and it's a daytime. So Layla, so also that says to me it's a daytime chart. So be sure it's a daytime chart, Layla. Otherwise, the moon would be the first. Okay, how do triplicity rulers work with bound rulers? We haven't gotten to that yet. Moon and Pisces. I love it. Somebody trying to skip forward. Did you even put in the triplicities first? Let's see. Moon and air triplicity night chart. So first period. Mercury, excellent. Well done. Can Antoine see this chart? No, I can't. Okay. So now what we're doing is I'm going to go back to so CF is back with us, so she can help with the chat things. And also, like I said, feel free to, if you need to blurt something out, because if you hadn't, I wouldn't have known. So yeah, I was like, why aren't I seeing anything? I'm thinking, oh my God, what happened to everybody? Oh, and there's the chat, so I can kind of put it there. I think, oh shit, okay. One more time, hold on 1 second. All right. Wait, I've got to do something stupid, sorry. I've got to stop the share and do this again. There we go. Sorry. Okay. All right. So we're going to go back to our technique. It looks like people are kind of getting it. You're looking for this. Okay, so fourth house Sag moon would be DNP, would be, I don't know, because you have to tell me whether or not your chart is daytime or nighttime. Right? So that's the important thing. So remember, so the important thing first is my chart is this. My chart is daytime. This is the diurnal chart. That then determines what the hierarchy or what the sequence of the three planets will be. Then we look to see if it's daytime, we look to the sun, right? Because that's the light in charge of the daytime. So what sign is the sun in? Is the sign in Gemini? Is the sign in whatever? And so what element is that sign in? Because remember, triplicity equals element. So Erica, can you tell me that stuff now? Okay, so we've got Moon and Earth triplicity, nocturnal chart. Okay, fourth house in Capricorn. Moon first, Mercury the second, Moon is first. No, for Earth triplicity, it would be Moon, Venus, then Mars, Gina. So Mercury is only triplicity Mercury is involved in is the air triplicity, and that's what she asked me to do, was to bring the chart back. Okay, so remember, it all kind of, so hopefully you've been writing this down, because the whole thing around the three, how important three is. Remember, there are three zodiac signs in each element. There are 3 planets who rule each sect. Sect means daytime or nighttime. There are 3 planets who rule each triplicity or element. Triplicity equals element. It would be day, night, because it's air. Yes, it's air. So it would be day, night. That's right, exactly. It'd be Saturn, Mercury, Jupiter. And so you should be, I mean, you can put D and P for me, but do be thinking for yourself, oh, it would be this one, it'd be that one, it'd be this one. If you're under 28 years old, the first triplicity ruler is operating right now. That's how this is important. So you're in that 28-year period. So this is an overarching, we didn't even talk about that, Natalie, the last time, about the triplicity rulers of the whatever. We had a lot of other stuff to talk about. But yeah, so that's another cycle that you're in. All right. So if you're under 28, you're in that cycle now. If you're under 56, you're in the second cycle, whatever that means. By thirds of life. Yes, triplicities are by thirds of life. I mean, yeah, I guess, it's obviously approximate. It's funny. I don't know that somebody may have come up with a technique for figuring out how to do this really, really specifically and really figuring out exactly when it changes. But I think we can go by Saturn return. That's basically what I'm looking at is, so between 28, 29, around that time. So yeah, I would say that definitely. And so be looking at that planet. Now that you know, right, the planet, the first triplicity ruler, we're not looking at the planet who rules the sign, right? So if your moon's in Aries, we're not looking for Mars. We're looking for the 3 planets who rule the fire element, which is the triplicity to which Aries belongs. And so we'd be looking for these 3 planets. Okay, so any more questions around that? Other than that, I'll move on. So that's something for you to kind of ponder, to kind of learn, to kind of look at. Okay. I think everybody might feel a little bit more comfortable now. Thank you so much, Natalie, for bringing that to my attention. Yeah, of course. Malefics can be triplicity rulers, right? Saturn is the daytime ruler of air. Mars is a participator in Earth, and he's the nighttime ruler of water, right? Saturn's a participator of fire. So yeah, they can definitely. Right, there's only 5 of them, right? There's only 7 of them altogether, and they all participate in whatever. Also, remember, here's the thing: a malefic planet can act benefically. A benefic planet can act malefically. Often, the indicators will be mixed. It's for us to figure out what those mixtures really represent. Okay, so I'm so glad I figured out to do this. This is so much better. This way I can actually see it as it comes up. All right, so we've talked about the triplicity rulers. We've learned the predominator or light and authority technique. Now, what we would have done if we were doing the actual predominator technique is we would have looked at the ruler of the planet, of the moon. And if you remember from last week, if you were with me last week, the moon is one of the main significators for the soul, and so is the planet who rules that sign, right? So is the planet who rules the sign that the moon is in. So this is very connected to these 2 techniques are kind of connected, although they're not exactly the same. So someone asked me how the triplicity works with the balance. I don't know that it necessarily does or has to. That's actually my answer. I don't think that it does. Because look, think, if the triplicity is looking at overarching long periods of time, the bound is looking at specific allotments of time. Because as I said, okay, so we'll look here. So a planet in its own bound is just like a man in his own seat. So the term represents 5 uneven divisions of the zodiac sign. So this is the time now to download and look at your zodiac dignity chart. And I'm going to bring that up in a second too. And we'll look at all of that. So for instance, Venus rules the first 12 degrees of Pisces. Any planet between 0 and 12 degrees of Pisces would be called in the term of Venus. So it would be considered in her term. Only the 5 wandering stars have ownerships of terms. So that means that the moon and the sun do not have ownership of the term. And the terms were directed to predict events. So the terms were then, the amount of time of the terms were then, you could either use them as years, or you could change them into ascensional times that were then translated into years. So they were used predictably for the most part. To answer, once again, to come back to this question about how they work together, it's cycles within cycles. I just did a solar return for Natalie, and I think that was probably something that, even though I never said it out loud, it was, cycle on top of cycle, and all interacting together. Yeah, and of course, the video will be available too, so you can always get what you missed. Right, so yes, so it's cycles within cycles, and the terms represent a different type of cycle if we're using them in a predictive manner to mark time than the overarching concept of the triplicity rulers. That's my take on it. And then the very last is face. And face is the same as what we know as decans, right? So the decans, the 30 decans, and decan means an area of 10, right? It's an area of 10. So it's the same planet's own. So a different planet, including the sun and the moon, owns each 10-degree division of the zodiac. So going to now. Okay. Shit, sorry. There we are. There we go. Okay, so this is the chart for it. And you should now have yours open. So there's one that looks like this, and then there's one that's kind of multicolored. And to be honest, I don't really like that one very much. But as you can see, it's got the signs of the zodiac here. It's got the domicile ruler here. It's got the exaltation ruler here. It's got the 3 planets that are the triplicity rulers there. And then from 0 to 6 degrees, that's the term of Jupiter. From 6 to 12 is the term of Venus. From 12 to 20 is the term of Mercury. 20 to 25 for Mars. 25 to 30 for Saturn. Okay, and then as you can see also, the faces. Mars is the first 10, Sun is the second 10, Venus is the third. So what they would have done is they would have assigned points. Oh, also wait, let me go to here. We're gonna talk about this in a second. Peregrination, notice that. Detriments and fall, right? So just like every planet has its house or its domicile and its exaltation, the opposite of those signs are the detriments and the fall. So make sure everybody can see. The first triplicity ruler is day for day births and the night for night births. That's absolutely correct. Okay, yes, exactly. That's exactly correct, Moran. Okay, so I'm going to go back now to my other sheet. And we're going to just deal with this essential debility thing. I can go back to the chart, or actually you should have it open. So you can either, or you should have it kind of open, or you can be looking at this as well. So when we deal with, we've already dealt with the 6 androgynous pairs that make up the signs that are owned by planets. You know, how each planet has one masculine and one feminine sign, right? However, now we're looking at, in order to find essential debility, we're looking at the oppositional pairs, the 6 oppositional pairs, right? And so Aries is the opposite sign to Libra. Taurus is the opposite of Scorpio. Gemini is the opposite of Sagittarius. Cancer the opposite of Capricorn. Leo the opposite of Aquarius. Virgo the opposite of Pisces. okay? So that means that if any planet is dignified in one of these signs, and they're in the opposite to that sign, that they're detrimented. They're in what would be considered essential debility. So for instance, the sun is exalted here in Aries. That means Libra is the fall of the sun. The moon is exalted in Taurus. That makes Scorpio the fall of the moon. Mercury is in his domicile in Gemini. That makes Sagittarius his detriment. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. That makes Capricorn his fall. The sun is in his domicile in Leo. That makes Aquarius his detriment. And then Mercury is domicile and exaltation in Virgo, which means he's detriment and fall in Pisces. Okay, so that's how we come to what is detriment and fall. And so when we look at this, I mean, none of you at this point are people that I would be asking a question like, why does this matter? Because I think through the course of the weeks that we've been looking at this stuff and working together, I've been really showing why this matters. You know, one of the whole things was planetary strength and why it matters, right? So I'm really, this is really, really important. When planets are in their detriment and or fall, they can't act in the way that they want to act. They can't do what they would usually do as themselves, right? So they don't have access to their own significations. So Venus might not be, her idea of beauty might not be traditionally, conventionally beautiful, what we think of as beautiful. It might be her aesthetic, but it might not be what we think of as beautiful, right? Mercury in Pisces might not like school, might not like learning in a structured manner, right? So these are the ways in which these things can happen. So did you see when I'm looking at all of these different ones? All of these different ones have their own. Oh, actually, we're going to get to it in a second. Sorry, hold on with that because we're going to. So notice how the detriment and fall have negative points. And then the final debility, which I don't really consider debility per se, but it does mean that there is no dignity, that the planet has no dignity in the degree of the sign in which it is in. Okay, so that's really what peregrine means, right? So it's in a sign, not just in a sign, but that part of the sign, because it's pretty obvious that a planet might not own a sign or be exalted in a sign, but they might be in term in that sign, right? They might be in their own term, or they might be in their own face, right? But if you're a planet and you have nothing in any of them, then you are what would be called peregrine. So let me bring that chart back up again, just to kind of bring that point home. So like I said, let's say you've got the moon at 14 Cancer. Okay, here's Cancer. That means that the moon has 5 points as the domicile ruler. She would maybe get 3 points. So there's 2 systems of using the triplicities, which we may or may not talk about. So she may get 3 points for the triplicity as well. But she's not going to own any of these terms, right? Only the 5 wandering stars own the terms. Let's say, sorry, wait a second. Let's say it's Mercury. Okay, sorry about that. Scratch that. Mercury is in Cancer. Mercury is in Cancer. Mercury is not in domicile in Cancer. Mercury is not in exaltation in Cancer. Mercury is not in detriment or fall in Cancer. Okay, but that also means that Mercury, if he were between 13 and 19 degrees of Cancer, he would be in his own term. And let's say Mercury, what did I say? He's at 14 degrees of Cancer. Mercury is in his own term, and he is in his own face. So he would not be peregrine. Does that make sense? So that's the difference. He would not be peregrine. Let's say you've got the moon, he would not be peregrine because he would be in his own term, which would give him 2 points, and in his face, which would give him 1. We're going to talk about points in a second. I haven't been consistent about points. I realize that, and we're going to get to that, so I'm sorry. Let's say, I just want to show you also then what peregrine would look like. My moon is at 27 degrees of Aries, all right? The moon owns no terms. And the moon does not own any of these faces. That means my moon is 100% peregrine. Okay, so that is the definition of peregrine. When a planet is in a sign in which it has no dignity at all. All right. So that's peregrine, and that's important because everybody has peregrine planets. Now, here's the thing. Well, 2 things. Anything can be made to work in a natal chart. And 2, I don't necessarily see peregrination as a debility as much as I see it as a neutral state that is dependent on the state of its ruler. I'll say that again. I don't see peregrination so much as a debility as I see it as a neutral state that is dependent on the state of its ruler. Let's see if there are any questions. All right, so let that sink in for a second. Oh, 9 new messages. Okay, so it looks like she's taking care of a lot of that stuff. Beautiful, fabulous, thank you. All right. Okay, so we've looked at the dignities and the debilities. So what you're going to do next is you're going to do this. Oh, and before we move on, let's make sure that everybody has this straight. Almost everybody has been with me long enough that we shouldn't have to say this too much more. When I say something is in this, when you see this says 13 Pisces, what it really means is it's between 12:01 and 13:0. My Saturn is at 12 degrees and 27 minutes of Pisces. Anything between 0:1 and the next point 0, and the next, so anything at 1 minute to the following degree at 0 minutes is in that degree. So as you can see here, 0 degrees in 1 minute to 1 degree with 0 minutes constitutes the first degree. Now, that's weird, that's strange. Yeah, it's not really, because think about it. You're in the first degree until 1 degree and 1 minute. And then you're no longer at 1 degree. You're now in 1 degree plus. And that's how that works. 1 degree plus anything will put you in the second degree. So when I say 13 degrees, really, I'm talking about 12 degrees and 27 minutes. When I say 25 degrees, I'm talking about 24 degrees and 24 minutes. Once again, when I've talked about people who are worried about the 22nd degree, usually they have something in the 23rd degree, but they see the number 22. 8 degrees means 7 degrees and 3 minutes. 11 degrees means 10 degrees and 20 minutes. 14 degrees means 13 degrees and 27 minutes. 22 degrees means 21 degrees and 57 minutes. Do you understand? So that is how that works. Are there any questions about that? Because that's important. So 29 and any number of minutes is the 30th degree. Is the 30th degree. There are 30 degrees in every sign. That's a great question. The 29 minutes and anything plus anything is the 30th degree. You're in 0 degrees at 0 degrees. Minutes. What do you mean by minutes, CF? So 29 degrees and any number plus any number of minutes would put you at 30. You are only at 0 degrees on the 0th degree. If the planet is one of the triplicity rulers of the element of the sign it is in, is this also a dignity? Yes. Or just being in its own term or decay? No, triplicity is one of the 5 dignities. The 5 dignities are domicile, exaltation, triplicity, term, and face. So I want you to do what I've done here and put the degrees. And then we're going to see the point system, and you'll see it again, Anna. All right, so write out a list. The Chaldean order is what? From slowest to fastest. Right, so the slowest planet is Saturn, the fastest is Moon. Okay, use that just to bring it in. Okay, so while you're doing that, you should be listing all of your sections, all of your chart. All right, so this is what you'll look at. And did I put Peregrine in? I did. Okay, this is the pointing system. Now, I want you to take this pointing system with a grain of salt. I really do. Because what I want you to do really is just get an idea of who owns what. There's so much to learn. There's so much stuff to know. Like from here now, we can start learning and also, so this pointing system can lead into the thing that I think is really pernicious, is where people are always saying, is that good or bad? And remember, we don't really ask that question here. We ask, how will it operate? How specifically, what does that mean for how it will specifically operate? I mean, we ask the question if it's good or bad because we want to know that. But ultimately, we're more interested in how is this planet going to specifically operate? So what you were going to do is you're going to go to your chart. You're going to go to your dignity chart. And let's just take one planet for now. You can do the rest on your own. We'll take one planet for now. I'm going to take, let's do everybody's Venus. Okay, so my Venus is at 13 Aquarius. And when I go to my handy dandy chart, I see that Saturn is gets 5 points for domicile. No one is exalted, so no one gets 4 points. It's a nocturnal chart, so Mercury gets the 3 points. Now, like I said, there are two systems. You can do it so that all three get the 3 points, and you can do it so that only the ruler of the sect gets the 3 points. For right now, we're going to do it whereas only the ruler of the sect gets the 3 points. So if the planet is one of the other three, for right now, it will not get the 3 points. So I know that might be confusing, but we're just going to do it that way. This will reinforce whether it's day or night in your chart for you, at least. And then down the line, we can look at looking at all three as dignity. And if I talk more, I'm going to say go ahead and use all three, so I'm going to shut up. All right, so Mercury would get the 3 points. Now remember, it's Venus in this sign that we're looking for. So we're looking to see if Venus has any dignity in the sign. She's at 14 degrees. Venus owns between the 7th and the 13th degree, so I've just missed her. She's at 14 degrees. Jupiter is the term ruler. And then I'm in the second decan, so Jupiter would get the 2 points. I'm in the second decan, Mercury gets the 1 point. So you could write it out like this. Mercury, Jupiter, and then was Mercury again, what? Yeah, was it? Yeah, let's see. Yeah, it was. Okay, yeah, so Mercury is the most dignified in this chart, in this sign, right? Venus gets 5. Oh, I'm sorry, Saturn, dipshit. Saturn gets 5. No one gets 4. Mercury gets 3. Jupiter gets 2. Mercury gets 1. So Mercury. Mercury has a say in how this Venus works. I don't get this. Are we looking at Venus only or all planets? Oh, good question. You're looking only at Venus, and you're looking at the. So actually, look at my sheet here, and we're going to need to leave this in like 5 minutes or so that I can get to the 10th house. I didn't expect this to take quite so long. Look at this degree here, right? So you're going to put down Venus. You're going to put down the degree and sign that she's in. Okay. So whatever. So put that in the chat for me now, Layla. And everybody, if you want to, if you're also confused, you can do the same thing. So put the Venus for Sagittarius. Okay. Now, everybody, we're going to go to the chart. Can you see the chart? So we're going to go to the chart and we're going to look for Sagittarius. Okay, so you're going to look for 23 Cancer. You're going to look for 3 Cancer. Okay, but I'm just going to use 17 Aries. All right, so perfect. All right, excellent. 1 Pisces. Excellent. We'll go through all of this right now. For Sagittarius. Here's Sagittarius. Remember, we're looking for 2 things. Who is dignified in that degree of the sign? And is the planet we're looking at dignified in that degree of the sign? Okay, 2 separate things. Who's dignified there? Is the planet I'm looking at, Venus, is Venus dignified there? All right, so obviously she doesn't have the domicile, Jupiter does. I don't know if it's day or night. Whoever has day or night, that's not Jupiter. She has between 12 and 17. She would get 2 points if your Venus were between 12 and 17 Sagittarius, but she isn't. And she owns none of the faces. So this means, yeah, and she doesn't own any of the faces. This means that your Venus is peregrine. So that's basically what we're looking for. We're looking to basically see how, I want to find one, does anybody have one where their Venus is, Gina, this is the last one I'm going to do. Everybody else should be able to do their own. And if we have some time, although I doubt we're going to, because there's a lot to go through in the 10th house thing as well. Okay, we're going to look at the Venus Pisces, 1 degree Pisces, she said. Okay, Jupiter has 5 points as the domicile ruler. Stop. Oh, good. Damn it, I had it perfect. Okay, 5 points as the domicile ruler. Venus gets 4 points. Okay, she's dignified. Now, if this is a daytime chart, Venus will also get 3 points, which means that she now has more points than Jupiter. If it's between 0 and 12, which it is, she gets another 2 points. And she has none of the faces. So that means that potentially, that's right, Mariah. If none of the planets are in term or face or domicile or exaltation, right? Domicile, exaltation, triplicity, term, or face. If none of those planets are that, then they are peregrine. Almost every single planet in my chart is peregrine, so do not despair. All right, get it? Okay, good, Natalie. So Venus gets 4 points, plus 3 points if it's daytime, plus 2 points. That's what, 9 points. That's it. She gets 9 points. This is a very, very strong Venus. That's basically what this is all about. And when we finally get to our mutants, which some of you may have heard that term before and some of you may never, when we get to our mutants, we would be calling, our mutant means victor or winner. Venus would be the mutant of this sign. So she would be of this degree of Pisces. Venus would be the mutant. She'd be the winner. She'd win over Jupiter because Jupiter's the domicile ruler with 5 points, but she's got 9. We're looking if the planet in zodiac has more dignity than the. That's not just what we're doing. Remember, so don't forget what I said we're doing. We're doing, that's maybe the third thing we're doing. The first thing we're doing is we're looking to see if the planet we are looking at, right, if it's in this case Venus, if that planet is dignified in that degree of that sign. So my Venus is at 1 degree of Aries or 4 degrees of Sagittarius. Is Venus dignified in 4 degrees of Sagittarius? Jupiter, Sun, Jupiter, Mars, Jupiter, Mercury. No, she is not. Exactly. Good. People are getting it. So then the other thing is, who is dignified at 4 degrees of Sagittarius? Jupiter. Jupiter gets 5. Jupiter gets 8. If it's between 0 and 12, Jupiter gets, which it does, right? Because you're at 4, it gets 10. Get it? And the more free you are of the planets, the more you are off the will, the karma, will of karma, right? Exactly. So, okay, so that is essential dignity. And the thing is, it's important to kind of use to look at, because because also now that you're figuring out how to use points, we can look at the third thing that Layla did bring up, which was looking at which planet is really more dignified in that sign or in that degree of the sign. Like we saw with 1 degree of Pisces, Venus is way more dignified than Jupiter in that degree of Pisces. And so now you understand what these points mean. At 13 Aquarius, Saturn gets 5 for domicile. No one gets 4 because no one is exalted. Mercury gets 3 for triplicity. Jupiter gets 2 for term. Mercury gets 1, which gives Mercury 3 points. So he's actually the most dignified planet in that degree of that sign. 1930, yes, it would. It would be read as the 20th. Remember, anything above 19 and 0 minutes, anything above 0 minutes, the minute it goes to 1 minute, it would be considered in the next degree. As the 20th degree and in the third phase, yes, you would. Wait, no, isn't it 0? Oh, maybe is it 0 to 10? Yes, you would. No, I think it'd be 21 to 9, 21 to 30, 21, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think it's 21 to 30. I think it's 11 to 19, 11 to 20. I think it's 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30. So second decan. All right. Okay, now moving on to the 10th house. So this has been a compound lesson. Partially, so I did this lesson for 2 reasons. One is because there's stuff coming up that I want you to be able to keep up with me over, and you need to know. There's just no way you're going to be able to do it without knowing it. And then 2, we can apply it to what we're about to do. And so that's the most important thing, because all we're doing is looking at planets and where they are. We're looking at the 2 ways in which planets can be dignified or can be strengthened or weakened: by essential dignity, which is by sign, or accidental dignity, which is by house. So on to the 10th house. So one of the things that I've been noticing about these particular texts is that the astrologers really view these particular areas as umbrella areas. So the 10th house represents lots of different things. And in many cases, you don't look primarily to the house ruler for the signification of what you're looking for, right? So for instance, and we're about to see it, we're about to look at it. So for instance, when we're looking for who's the significator that represents work, when we're looking at that, the very first thing is not the 10th house and the ruler of the 10th at all. And so I found that to be really interesting. It's the same thing when next week when we look at money and the part of fortune. we're going to see that the second house is not the first thing you look at for money. So there's all of these, that's what's so cool about these techniques. And, you know, it's interesting because I considered myself a good astrologer and knew quite a bit, but you know, with time comes more understanding and more ability to kind of digest a lot of this material. And I see that what I was doing was kind of incomplete. And this has really been helpful. So let's first kind of start with what the 10th house represents. And we're using Bonatti. And what we see kind of from Bonatti is that Bonatti was using all of these Arabic astrologers that we've been talking about. One of the main people that we've been working with is, what's his name? Not Al-Biruni. Al-Biruni. So we've been working with him, and he mentions Al-Biruni. We mentions Al-Battani, but he mentions all of these different people that we've actually been looking at. So it is Al-Biruni. Okay. So Al-Buaz. So what he says about the 10th house. So Al-Buaz and other ancients said the 10th house is a royal house and signifies empire and kingdom, a profession and dignities and offices. Every art which sometimes someone practices, with whence he is called a master, and it signifies mothers, grandmothers, and all such old female ancestors and mothers-in-law. Now, why would it be considered mothers? Because if you remember when we were just talking about the father is the 4th house. So his wife is the 7th from the 4th, which would be the 10th, right? So anything, the 7th from any planet, from any house, could be considered the spouse of that house. So the 3rd and the 9th, if your brother is the 3rd, the 9th house could be your brother's spouse. So the 4th house is the father, this 10th house is the father's spouse, which is your mother. So that's the reasoning behind that. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is that the 10th house is there to show empire and kingdom, professions and dignities, and anything that you master. So any kind of skill or art that you become a master in. I think these are really important things to kind of distinguish about the 10th house. Then he says, Adwala, divine things, honors. That's another really important. And positions of civil authority and the like, right? So the 10th house, remember, it's culminating from the ascendant, or it's the highest point. And so anything culminating represents like this result, this kind of resultant, and it's also elevated. If it's culminating, we're going to look at charts in a second, and we'll talk about culmination and elevation in a second. And so the 10th house so think about how you are elevated to kingship. Think about how your rank or your fortune or your public profile. Think of influencers, and influencers are essentially 10th house people, right? They're using the 3rd house of communications and messages and things of that nature. But ultimately, they're 10th house. They're public people, and so the 10th house is your public persona. And your reputation for what you are known, the actions for which you are known. Okay, so divine things, honors, positions of civil authority, the king, glory, and reputation. So there it is, king, glory, and reputation of one's worth. Judges judging a case, overseers, so bosses, overseers of work. So often when we do horary charts, the boss is the 10th house, and it's the job and the boss is the 10th house. And look, and here's an example. I just thought I would put this in because here's an example of the use of the triplicity rulers. So the first lord of the triplicity of the royal house signifies power and exaltation, and the loftiness of the seat of power and the highest dwelling. So this is about how high I get, how high I attain, how high the ladder goes for me in my public life and or professional life. The second one signifies the voice of command. So that represents how much authority I have over others. And then the third one is stability or durability. Of course, we want to have a stable and durable career. So here are the significators for the profession. Look, so if you wish to be certain about the matter of the day's profession, also his work, what kinds it will be, and on his force and prosperity and his kingdom, and likewise concerning his duties. Here we go. So the very first thing you're going to do is look at the ascendant of the nativity. Why? You'd be looking at the ascendant of the nativity because the ascendant represents talents. That's one of the reasons. But the other reason is because if you remember, we've talked about accidental dignity, and we've talked about planets in angles being the strongest and being able to advance, and how the two strongest places in the chart are the first house and the 10th house, right? So we look first to the ascendant. Is there a planet in the ascendant? Because that's more than likely going to nail it. If there isn't a planet in the ascendant, then you look to the 10th. So already, and if you remember, we've talked about the 7 advantageous places. The ascendant and the 10th house are the 2 most advantageous of the 7. Then we would go to the 7th and look at how he says it will signify the laziness of the native in his word. Also in the 4th. So basically, he's saying if there isn't a planet in the 1st, look to the 10th. If there isn't a planet in the 10th, look to the 7th. If there isn't a planet in the 7th, look to the 4th. So do that now. Look at your chart. Is there a planet in the ascendant? Is there a planet, especially if you have many planets in the first house, like Lily, who's the closest to the ascendant? And then also, who's the strongest? Okay. Then, if no planets in the first, any planets in the so any planets in the angles. So that's the first thing you would be looking for if you're looking for what's telling me what profession I should be going for. Find one of those planets in them. One of them you can take what is signified by the native's work from it. However, the things signified by are weaker than the aforesaid houses. He's talking about if it's 7 or 4, it's going to be weaker than the 1st or 10th. If there were no planets in angles, then you look at the rulers of the angles. Right? So let's say I've got a chart where there are no planets in the angles at all. No planets in 1, 10, 4, 7. Then I would look at the planets that rule those planets. And then look at the planet to which, okay, so this is an interesting thing that he's talking about that I'm not going to put a lot of stock in for you, but he's saying, look, even at the planet to which the moon is first joined after the corporal separation from the sun. What they're saying is, after the new moon, they're not talking about the chart as it exists in your hand. They're talking about what's the first aspect the moon made right after the prenatal new moon. That's what it's actually talking about. Or look to the planet that was first joined to the part of fortune when the part of fortune changed to 0 degrees of whatever sign it's in now. So it's basically tilting it backwards to the very first thing. So all of these are about kind of impressions, the things that make the strongest impression. The next one is really interesting because we have a chart that actually shows this example. Now, one of the things I want to say about this is the more that I work with these things and look at these things, the more that I realize that people need to be people need to not hesitate about paying astrologers for their work. Because look at all the work that goes into, look at all the stuff that goes into this, all of the things that the person is doing. And that you yourself would do if you were going to look at it and you were going to follow this particular technique, right? Astrologers deserve to be paid. An astrologer who does something like this deserves to be paid. Pay your astrologers. That's why on Reddit so many times I just see people who are asking for a free reading. They're like, can you tell me, my favorite one right now is, can you tell me my future husband, when I will meet them, what kind of person they'll be, etc. It's like, you know what, that's a paid, that's for payment. You need to pay for that information. But as you can see, there's so much that goes into it. And there's so much that you need to know. The good thing is that you all have been with me for a while. And so now when we kind of talk about some of these things, you know some of this vocabulary. You know kind of how to look at the chart in the way that we need to in order to access this information. So we're talking about combustion here for number 7. We're talking about combustion. And combustion, what they're basically saying is look and see if there's any planet who has just come out from under the rays. Remember, there are three kind of stages of combustion, from 15 degrees or 17 degrees until about 8.5 degrees, the planet is under the rays. From 8.5 until about 17 minutes to its exact, it's in deep combustion, or until about 17 minutes. From 17 minutes to exact, it's in Casimir. All right, and so Casimir is really is the only kind of good thing that's about combustion. The rest are not so good. So what he's saying is that some planet has just freshly come out from the rays of the sun, and they're ready to operate. They're fresh and ready to go. And see if that planet, or he who were in the first, fourth, or seventh, or whatever, has Al-Idisal. Al-Idisal is essentially applying. Now remember when we've done our working with aspects, and we've talked about applying and separating, and see if it's applying with the moon. I'm going to go through two more things here, and then we're going to come back to this because I'm going to show you an example of this perfectly. If, however, you were to find one of the planets to which the two aforesaid accents pertained, you will consider him only and omit the other. So they're basically saying, let's say you found a planet in the Ascendant or the 10th house, and it was ruler of the 10th, and it was applying to the moon. You would immediately take that planet. Okay, so you find one planet and it's basically knocking all of these rules out of the ballpark. That's the planet you'll use. Or it's coming out of combustion and about to apply to the moon, or and it's in the first or 10th or 4th or 7th. So, and then the other thing I want you to think about is this one, which if there were more of the planets in the, if you have many planets in the angles, you will prefer to all others him who had dignities of greater authority there, or more of them. Now that you understand about essential dignity, you may get an idea of what that's talking about, right? So that's basically saying, let's say you've got this planet in the Ascendant, you've got this planet in the 7th, you've got this planet in the 10th, but you've got this planet in exaltation in the 4th. Use that one. Okay, so let's move to a chart here so that we can look at that. First of all, are there any, I'm going to stop share for a second, see if there's any. Okay. All right. Fortune, yeah, we'll get to fortune, y'all. That's actually next week. Okay. So I'm an opera lover. And so I'm really interested in people who do opera, and who are into the charts of opera singers. And the charts especially are germane to this particular one today. The charts of the top people, like the people that got to the very, very top. And we're going to be looking at a few people who've gotten to the very top. And also, remember, there's two parts of this, and we'll see if we'll actually get to that. We're at 3:30 already, but we probably are only going to be able to get to this particular part, which is finding the profession. The next part of it is finding how much force and how prosperous the person is in the profession. And so I was going to try, because I'm putting other things in, it might not, so we'll see what happens. I don't think so. Okay, so we're looking at the planet that is representing the profession. And so I'm just looking around here. Okay, we've got the sun in the Ascendant, so that might be a one. And look at how the sun is squaring this Mars. Mars is the ruler of you can't actually see it, but Mars is the ruler of the 10th house. So it's, yeah, you can't, unfortunately, you can't see it because this fucking screen sharing thing is there. But yes, it's actually Scorpio on the 10th house. So on some level, yes, that would work. And the 10th is fame, and this person is famous, and also the 10th is public, and etc. And we've also got this Saturn in the 10th. We've got the sun in the 10th. Technically, this moon, this Mercury, and this Jupiter are also in the 10th, and they're just leaving, so the moon is just leaving it, right? So there's a bunch of different possibilities, but remember, there's two things that I want to bring to attention. They were just talking about combustion. He said, if there's any planet who is freshly out of combustion and no more than 20 degrees away, and it's involved in an application with the moon. That planet is here. It's Venus. And Venus is within 5 degrees of the second house, and the second house represents the voice, and Venus is beauty. And Landry Price is known for the beauty of her voice, the uncanny beauty, the spell of beauty is what Landry Price is known for. And remember the other thing that they said, if there are many, use the one who's the most dignified, or use the one who is more than one, who completes more than one of the rules. Venus is here. She's completing this 20. She's 20 degrees away. She's applying to the moon. She rules one of the angles. She totally, in my opinion, makes a great example of this particular rule of coming out of combustion, of what they were just talking about, of coming out of combustion. All of these planets would be viable. What's they got to say? Interesting, huh? All of these planets will look, well, we're going to look at Judy Garland next, because that's another one that does something similar. Okay, Judy Garland, one of the most famous people in the world. So once again, we've got planets in the ascendant. We've got Venus here. So that says, oh, there it is, right there, no problem. And I'm saying, yeah, okay, sure, that makes good sense. But what is she doing? She's not ruler. She doesn't rule any of the. She doesn't rule any of the angles. She's not an aspect to the moon or to the sun. She is angular, and she is in the first house. So you can say, yeah, give her she makes the most sense. But look, remember last week when we talked about locating the soul, we talked about finding the soul significator, the primary significator for the soul in one planet. And if you'll notice, remember our primary significator, not the primary significator, but what they call the soul significator. But our primary significators are the moon and Mercury for the soul. And then we look to the planets that rule them. But we also look to any planets that they might be applying to and separating from. If you look, the moon is about to change signs, and she is applying to Mercury. Mercury is separating from the square of Saturn, who is exalted. Remember that rule about if there's more than one of them, choose the one who's the most exalted or the most dignified. There that is happening, which means that Mercury is going to translate the light of Saturn to the moon once the moon hits Capricorn. So, and since both of these planets are involved with Saturn, Saturn also becomes the primary soul significator for the soul. And so when you see that, none of these things, I always say, none of this stuff is supposed to be done in a vacuum. It all interlocks. If you see soul indicators involved with professional indicators, yeah, that matters. Yeah, that's significant, right? So yeah, that really does. So, these are two very, very specific kind of indicators that kind of show themselves. I'm going to do one more person here. Okay, Henry Kissinger. This is a very different chart person. In this particular case, the planet in the ascendant makes sense because Henry Kissinger was Secretary of State and National Security Advisor to Richard Nixon. And also Kissinger is the one who convinced Nixon to bomb Cambodia, the carpet bombing of Cambodia and all the landmines. Those are Henry Kissinger's idea. Henry Kissinger talking his way into carnage. And this is that motherfucker with Mars and the Ascendant. And look at there. The moon's next application is to the Mars. And does he have any of the angles? No, he doesn't. Okay, he doesn't have any of the angles, but he does have the part of fortune. And we're going to talk about that. I was expecting the part of fortune to have more of a profile in these techniques. And I still say, yeah, bring it in, but but no. So this is a way in which we can now, and you can now be looking at the chart. I want to know, I'm going to stop the share for a second. Do we have anybody between 18 and 21 here? Oh, okay. Oh, Fatima. Okay, great. Good. Then, is your chart on IMGUR? Have you uploaded your chart already? Because what I wanted to do was look at somebody's chart here, but I wanted to make a really young person, the priority. I'm sure everybody feels like they're dissatisfied with their career and want to know what they really should be doing, etc. But what I'd like to do is give a person who is between 18 and 21 the precedent. So what you'll first do is you'll go to astro.com and you'll create a chart. And that's right, I did all this before some of you got here. And then imgur.com, exactly. I showed some of the people probably before you came in. And while we're waiting for that, we do have enough time that I can look at we can kind of look at the other technique. Now, as you can see, this is really complicated. This is not even kind of what I thought it was, to be honest, and this is what I mean by me understanding that, yeah, I thought I was a good astrologer, but now I'm really understanding that a lot of what I was doing was, alchemicians, if you can find it can be Placidus, I don't care. Some quadrant system, I don't care. It can even be whole sign if you want, I don't care. Whatever. Because it's, once again, remember my ideas and attitudes about whole sign versus quadrants. There's no such thing as versus. Use both and mix the two significators together. But if you can do alchemicians, that'd be beautiful. So I thought, I was one of those people who thought, oh yeah, look at the ruler of the 10th and blah, 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 blah. And as a result of Reddit, seeing all of these charts go through and people saying what they did for a living and it not showing in the 10th ruler and whatever. And so then I started thinking, and also I remember one person wrote in successful but miserable, and it totally showed with the ruler of the 10th. And I thought, is the 10th really talking about the conditions in the work conditions, or is it talking about how high we actually can go? Or so it's talking about all of those things. But like I said, what I realized was what's really happening is that the 10th house is an umbrella of experiences, and you don't necessarily use the 10th house and its ruler as the primary significator for many of the things that it represents. In this particular case, we're looking at the most prevalent and at large skill that you have. And so those things being in the ascendant or the 10th house makes those planetary significations. Like if Venus is there, that means dancing, singing, art, beauty, blah, blah, blah. So that's why a Judy Garland can have a Venus in the first house, and that makes perfect sense. So interesting. So let's go on and we'll look at, while Fatima's getting hers together, we'll look at the next level of techniques, which is about measuring the force. Oh, there's this fun stuff too, but I don't think we're going to look at. But you know what? Maybe we should, just for a second, because see, there's so much stuff. I kind of stuffing you like a sausage today. I kind of overprogrammed, unfortunately. So the signs do play a role, and I'm going to just go really quickly. Okay, thank you, CF. Okay, I'm going to go really quickly. So Look at what it says for the human signs. We've talked, remember, if you've been with me, we've talked about looking at the signs, the zodiac in a different way, then we've talked about human signs already. And so every profession which pertain to the native will be aided by that, which are likened to the figures of humans. So that's anybody that's in dealing with the public, sales, things of that nature, public speaking, teaching, human signs. Indeed, if it were a sign of quadrupeds and the native were to stick to a profession of minerals or the merchandising of metal, right? Constructions also use the pickaxe and light, so the quadruped signs. Then he talks about the equinoctial and solstitial signs, which are, which in this person's mind, Ptolemy's mind, those, I guess, were the most advantageous for learning. And those are obviously Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Interesting that he didn't think the Mercury and the Jupiter signs were, but I guess maybe he thought that they would show more initiative in those areas that were in which they had expertise. And then talks about the figures are likened to wild beasts and aquatic animals and professions which are good for moisture. So moisture, that's also a bartender, right? Or a beer hop creator or beer creator or something like that. What do they call those? I don't drink beer, so what is it called? Microbrewery or brewer, a beer brewer or something like that. And so he talks about those things: expertise in herbs, making presses, building of ships, salted things like salting fish, because of course the moon is water and the moon is the salty flavor. Okay, so that's just I thought that was super fascinating. Signs matter, what type of signs they are matter. So they don't just matter for essential dignity, they also matter for what's going on. Let's see, I'm gonna unshare for just 1 second to see if Fatima has, oh no, not yet, okay. Oh wait, is that you? Okay. We'll do Fatima and then we'll come back. Perfect. Okay, so what we're looking for, I know I can't make it bigger, I'm sorry. What we're looking for is first planets in the 1st, 10th, 7th, or 4th. And so we don't have that, right? So the next thing we would look for is, what is the next thing we would look for? If there is no planet in the 7th, oh, we would look for the ruler of the 4th, or the of the ascendant, or the 4th. So we would look then for, it looks like it's, oh, this is whole sign, okay, thank you. Oh, which means that maybe there are. Okay, wait, it means our Saturn is in the, no, that's in the 5th, okay. That Jupiter's in the 3rd. Okay, got it, okay, great, thank you. All right, here. So we would then look to the rulers of those. So Saturn, we would look to Saturn, the moon. Well, the MC is Scorpio, so I guess we would look to Mars. Oh, that means that the Saturn is in the 4th house. Okay, I was correct. And thankfully, the Saturn's not in Aries. So actually, the planet that seems to have the first, like say, oh yeah, this would make sense, is Saturn. Okay, that says, okay, Saturn would be the planet first. And so is Saturn involved with the moon at all? Not really. Does he involve he is the ruler of the ascendant. So I would say, the Saturn is involved, but that could be a possibility. But we could also look at who's involved with the moon. What did I say? If we find the soul with the profession, then, or is there a planet that's within 20 degrees of the sun coming out? And no, that's not happening. So it looks like what we should be looking for is who's involved with the moon. And we've got this Mercury Venus thing here. Now, Mercury Venus usually translates to singing and dancing and music and acting. But I just looked at one of the parts for the 10th house, and one of it was business. It was for business and the making of things with hands. So anything where skill towards beauty is happening. So in this particular case, because even though there's nothing, we've got this Saturn, but the Saturn is not really, he's in Taurus, right? Yep, he's in Taurus, ruled by this moon, by this Venus. So also ruled by this moon and this Venus. It's starting to make sense. Look at how things are in Mercury. So Mercury and the moon are both in Virgo, meaning that the Mercury is the primary kind of ruler of the soul, or the primary dispositor for the soul. So this could be somebody who teaches beauty, things about beauty. This could be somebody who teaches dance, teaches music. This could be somebody who is a demonstrator or choreographer. This could be somebody, now of course, Virgo is the fall of Venus, but it is the exaltation of Mercury. So we have both of them happening here. So this is somebody for whom a skill, kind of creating expertise in some kind of skill that's involved in creating harmony or beauty would be the best kind of job or profession. So in this particular case, what I did was I didn't really, yeah, we had a planet in the fourth, but it was ruled by planets that were all in connection with the moon and that also had strong signification for the soul. And so the strongest signification for the soul in this chart is Mercury, but he's here with the Venus and the moon together. So that would be what I would say, that you should be going for, either talking about beautifying, creating a skill, having a skill that exhibits something beautiful. Dancing, singing, acting. Acting would be a good one because Mercury is memory. And so this person should have a good memory and be able to be an actor. But I could also see like rugs, like weaving of rugs or making some kind of, yeah, there's all kinds of like things with this Mercury Venus moon that I think could happen. So that is what's going on with Fatima and how I would, thank you, Fatima, and how I would go about looking at a chart for that. As you can see, she didn't have anything she didn't really have anything involved in the houses that we were looking for. Or if she did, it was only because we were able to kind of make other associations that we were able to kind of come to some kind of judgment. But that kind of subtlety and gauging is where you're hoping to get to. That's where you're hoping to get to and hoping to do. So for the last few minutes, so we can do a few things. You have a choice. Would you like me to go on and talk about the next level of it, which is looking for success, or would you like me to do what I just did with two or three other charts? You have your choice. We went through a lot of information today. So look for success. Great. Okay, that one person says look for success. Is everybody cool with that? Okay, one person says other charts. Tied. Okay, well, you know what I'm going to do? We're going to look for success first, and if there's any time, which it probably won't be, we'll go to a chart. But actually, what I'd rather do, because what I think is really, as you can see, what I'd rather do is I'd rather look at some charts where it is really, where the examples are really strong. Because when you see a good, strong example of what I'm talking about, and then we look at a chart like Fatima's, we really get an idea of what's different, right? So Fatima has a very different type of chart from a Leontian price chart, and it's a much more difficult to find, and there's more difficulties in things going into figuring out what we're looking for, right? And that's where it gets interesting and difficult. All right, so let's then, thank you for everybody's voting. We'll move to, all right. On the force of the native and his prosperity, on his duties and on his kingdom. All right, so now we're looking to see what kind of conditions have to be there in a chart to bring somebody to the level of kingship. Now, when we say king, there's two ways that a person can be king. It can be hereditary and they be raised to it. And of course, just being the child of a king doesn't mean that you're the next in line, right? So there's that aspect of it too. But then in a lot of ways, our film celebrities are kings, right? Our business people like Jeff Bezos are kings, right? So there's a type of, and they have empires, and they have dominions and empires, and etc. Right? I'm in Mexico. The best way to get anything by mail is Amazon, right? This is his kingdom. So when they're talking about so-and-so is going to be a king, they might not necessarily mean that so-and-so is going to rule a kingdom in a conventional sense as be a hereditary king. What they're saying is they're going to get way, way up there. They're going to get way up there like a king, where they have influence over other people's lives. You know, where they have, actually they talk a lot about in these things, where they have influence over life and death. They have rulership over life or death. They have command over life or death, right? The king does. Okay, so we're looking for the native's force of prosperity and his duty in his kingdom. Now, this is the first one, and this is these are the, two things. These are the 5 areas. Now, we're going to look at lots starting next week, lot or parts. We're going to start looking at parts starting next week. So so this is actually a good thing. What we'll do is we'll come back to this, because I want to come back to this anyway, because I want to look at parts and I want to look at our mutants. And so I want to kind of teach you all how to find parts, and then 2, how to do something called compound our mutants, because now that you know about essential dignities to the extent that you do, what they're saying is you would look at the sun, you look at the moon and Saturn. This is really important, moon and Saturn in nocturnal nativities, right? So if it's a daytime chart, you're looking at the sun. You're looking at the moon and Saturn, the 10th, the part of kingdom, and the planet whose domicile you're to find the part of kingdom. So the part of kingdom and their lord. But the very first thing that shows you if the person is going to attain to really, really high rank is if the sun and the moon, or either of them, are in angles, made fortunate or strong. What does that mean? They're in angles, we know what that means. Fortunate or strong means the sun is in Leo or Aries, moon is in Cancer or Taurus, right? Joined to the Benefic, so that means either there's a trine or sextile for the sun to Venus or Jupiter, and there's a conjunction or trine or sextile to the moon, right? So square with and with reception, and there can be a square with reception. So at this point, you all should know what all of that stuff means, right? We've talked about all of this stuff. I've talked about reception. We know who the benefic planets are. We know what being made fortunate is about, right? And then, so this last one, the oriental ones are aspecting the sun, and the occidental ones are aspecting the moon or Saturn. We can skip that one. But if all of these, now remember, and if you were to see the significators with all of these conditions met, this will signify the native is undoubtedly going to be a king. All right, so we see the sun in the 10th house. Okay, we got a question. Where'd you go? Why doesn't that come up? Seems like click it won't show there. Oh, you're welcome. Damn. Sorry. All right, that's what I want at hand. Okay, so that's the native's going to be a king. So if the luminaries are not in the angles, okay, so if they're not in the angles, look, we finally used the Lord of the 10th and the planet in whose domicile the part of kingdom is, and look at the 10th and the ascendant, and the planetary al-Muqtas over said places. Now, did you see that? The planetary, remember we talked about al-Muqtas or al-Mutant means winner or victor. And we were looking at somebody's chart who had Venus at 1 degree Pisces, and she was the winner over Jupiter, right? Because she had 9 points and Jupiter had 5. That's what they're talking about when they say al-Muqtas or al-Mutant, is the planet who's the winner. Now, guess what? I can actually find an al-Mutant over all 3 of these places. We can find one planet who is the al-Mutant over all 3 of those places based on the scoring system. And that's one of the things I want to teach you how to do. It's called a compound al-Mutant. And so as you can see what he's saying here, and the planetary al-Muqtas over said places, whether the al-Muqtas were 1 or more. So he's basically saying whether you make a compound one or you look at the al-Muqtas of each of them. and it's commingling over the ascendant or over the 10th or with their lords. So in order for this consideration to happen, we would need, the luminaries aren't in the 10th, but we would need either the lord of the 10th, the planet who's in the part of kingdom, and look at the 10th of the ascendant, and the planetary amuktas over those places, right? So the ruler of the 10th, the ruler over the part of kingdom, the ruler of and then the ruler of the lord of the 10th even. And are they involved with the ascendant or the 10th or with their rulers? And that would make the part of kingdom a king. So, and this is the part of the 10th house. You take it from the sun to Saturn, and we're going to show this next week how to do these things. And it is projected from the ascendant. All right, so those are the first two kind of big rank. And we're going to now go to a chart again because we've got them in these charts. And that's what I find so fascinating. Okay, here's 19 again. And what did they say? It's a nighttime chart, right? The sun is below the horizon, excuse me. And they said by day you look to see if the sun is in an angle. And by night you look to see if the moon is in, or Saturn is in an angle. And look, the moon and Saturn are both in angles. Is there a configuration with the moon? There is a configuration with the moon. Now, it doesn't have all of these other things. The Saturn isn't, or the moon, neither of them are well aspected, exalted, or any of those other things. And also even but look, we have the moon and the sun both in the angles in this chart. So that definitely, those were one of the things we were looking for. And then we also have the moon applying to this exalted Venus, who is the primary significator for the profession in this chart. And also so is the Saturn. So we've got this moon-Saturn opposition involved in a T-square with this Venus. So that's one of those places where we have it kind of exactly what we've been looking for. Okay, Judy Garland. So we're looking for the sun or moon in, oh, this is the whole sign. Hold on a second, I don't want to use the whole sign. For right now, I don't want to use the whole sign. Okay. Okay, so we're looking for the sun or moon in an angle, right? And it's daytime, so we're looking for the sun, but that's not happening. But what we do have is we've got, once again, this Saturn in the 4th, and he's exalted, and he's involved with the moon, and he rules the 7th house, and he's with Jupiter. So on some level, this is even stronger than Leontine Price. And of course, Judy Garland is more famous than Leontine Price. And she's got that Venus in the ascendant too. So this is kind of a way. Now, this is a good place to kind of stop and to talk about the part of, once again, the part of fortune, because I basically, I think last week I told you all that I got very into the part of fortune, and I came up with a method for understanding how to look at fame, how to designate or delineate fame in the chart using the part of fortune and using it as an ascendant. This is a different technique altogether for it, which I'm finding to be relatively, really good. But I do find that in combination with my technique, it's even more interesting. So that technique I'm probably not going to be teaching during the 16 weeks, but it's interesting to see this particular thing and this particular manifestation of how these older astrologers were looking for rank and how the 10th house is really connected to rank and can also obviously connected to fame. It's connected to our public persona. You know, one of the terms that was used for the 10th house in the Greek period was praxis, and praxis is action. So the 10th house is really the acts by which we are known, or for which, the acts for which we are known. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. I'm done. I'm basically done. I'm feeling like, oh my God, I put out too much information. I'm sorry, but you know, you got the video, and you can go back to it and whatever else. But like I said, there's stuff that I want to get to, and I want us to be able to. I want you all to be with me when we get to them. And if we hadn't done this stuff on the dignities and the triplicity rulers and all that, if we hadn't done that stuff today, then I'd have to do it at some other point. It's just as well to do it today. Questions? Okay, see you next week, Moran. Any questions about what I've talked about? No? Okay. So how to work with something like this? You may not be able to yet. So that's one of the first important things to kind of keep in mind, is that you don't start being able to do something like this or being able to work with techniques like this. You start with the other stuff that we started with. And by knowing that stuff, we then graduate to being able to know more and more. You probably are in a particular place where, okay, now he showed me this technique and I want to figure out how to do it, especially like last week's thing with the soul and Mercury and the moon and everything. So what you need to be doing is to be learning more about what the planets mean, learning more about what the zodiac signs mean. Remember, we're trying to extract the astrology from the psychology here. So what you're really trying to do is understand those things as much as possible. And the more you do, the better you'll be able to work with techniques like this, right? So like that one technique with the moon and the Mercury, that was a relatively easy one that we can get into pretty easily, pretty well. But when we get to something like this, and next week when we talk about finding the significator for wealth and finances, it's complicated like this too. And so I'll try to organize it as easily as well as possible for you. But the more that you know and the more that you understand, the better you'll be able to access. Okay, thank you all so much.